Today, we're looking at running back Cameron Skattebo and what he could possibly do in year one with the Sun Devils after transferring from Sacramento State. Let's predict his stats on this edition of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. A special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. And if you're not doing so already, hit like and subscribe and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcast so you never miss content. And follow me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Okay, so on today's episode of the show, we are finally getting to the running back position. Spoiler alert, we're only going to be really looking at Cameron Skattebo simply because as of right now, there's not too many other guys to talk about in the backfield. We'll wait and see what's going on with Rachaad White and Carlos Brooks, who didn't get to participate in spring practices, at least not to the extent that Skattebo got to. Javen Jacobs is definitely someone that I want to keep my eye on, but we'll discuss him a little more tomorrow as we kind of wrap up the rest of the skill position guys on tomorrow's show, the best of the rest kind of thing. And then next week, we start looking at the quarterbacks. But Cameron Skattebo, running back, junior year, transferring from Sacramento State. He is the reigning Big Sky Offensive Player of the Year after rushing for over 1,300 yards and then picking up nearly 400 more yards through the air, 1,700 scrimmage yards for him a year ago, 10 total touchdowns. He was a monster. There was absolutely no stopping Cameron Skattebo last year for Big Sky defenses. He comes to Arizona State now, and he's going to be looking at a team that has really valued its transfer running backs over the last handful of years. Rachaad White, in the 2 years that he played at Arizona State, wound up rushing for over 1,000 yards. He was a very good pass catcher as well. Goes on to be a third-round pick in the pros. Valladay last year ended up rushing for over 1,100 yards. He led the conference in touchdowns. And then, even though he went undrafted, he signed a very lucrative undrafted free agent deal with the Houston Texans and could carve out a little niche with them as well. Prior to them, there were some good running backs as well. Benjamin and Demario Richard. Arizona State has really valued its running backs. So Skattebo is coming to a program that likes to run the football. And Skattebo is also a transfer guy, so he could potentially make it 3 in a row for successful transfer running backs for Arizona State. It's going to be really interesting to see what he can do this year. So today we're going to be predicting his stats based off of those things that we're looking at. This is going to be broken down differently compared to the other guys because we're not just doing receptions, yards, and touchdowns. There's obviously a lot more to discuss here at the running back position for Skattebo. So we'll go ahead and break it up. As you guys can see on the right-hand side of your screen, for those of you that are listening, we're going to break it up into rushing yards, receiving stats, and then scrimmage touchdowns. Of course, I'll touch on the total scrimmage yards for him as well. So starting off with the rushing yards in an absolute best case scenario, look, Arizona State is running on 2 consecutive seasons of having 1,000-yard runner. There's little reason to believe that Skattebo can't rush for 1,000 yards in his first season with the team. I think that in a best case scenario, he could do that. I'm really shooting for the moon here, and I'm going with 1,200 rushing yards. I thought about 1,100. I'm thinking that if this guy truly just absolutely takes that next step here in the Power 5 level, moving on from that FCS competition, this would be such a dramatic impact for the Sun Devils for him to immediately burst onto the scene and dominate his competition against a very good slate of teams this year. That would be an absolute best case scenario here is a 1,200-yard rushing season. I'll throw in, I don't totally feel comfortable guessing yards per carry right now, but for what it's worth, in his 2 seasons at Sacramento State, he ran for 9.1 as a freshman and 7 last year. I'd be willing to bet that in a best case scenario with the Sun Devils, he could rush for pretty darn close to 5.5 yards per carry, I think is what I would say as a best case scenario, probably about 5.5. In a worst case, look, there's a lot of factors that would play in the worst case scenario. Maybe he doesn't adjust at the next level. Maybe they use a host of guys. They use DeCarlos Brooks. They use Tevin White. That's his name. They use Tevin White. They use Javen Jacobs. They use some of the other kids that are coming to the program. Like, they could use a host of different guys, and that could lead to Skattebo maybe not getting the volume we expect him to get. Again, like I said, maybe he doesn't adapt to the Power 5 level in at least year one kind of thing. 500 rushing yards would probably be like a worst case scenario for him. I would venture to say probably around the low fours, maybe even the high threes in yards per carry. That would be such a dramatic drop from what he was doing, though. And I just don't know that I see Skattebo doing that. That's why my prediction here, I really wanted to go 1,000. I'm going to hesitate here for now, but I do think that 1,000 is incredibly attainable for him, especially given the Sun Devils' success with running backs over the last handful of years. I don't know that I truly believe that he can't get to 1,000 yards, but staying with the safe side, my prediction here is going to be 900 yards. I would go with a high 4 yards per carry, like 4.7, 4.8, flirting with that 5 yards per carry here for Skattebo. Overall, I do think this is going to be a 1,000-yard rusher. I do feel pretty confident that he's going to get there. I'm going to stay a little more conservative for now and go 900 rushing yards. I will tell you, there is a very good chance when we start making our bold predictions for the beginning of the season, I'm probably going to say Skattebo is going to get 1,000 yards. This is going to be based off a lot of things, but I do really think that Skattebo is going to be much closer to 1,000-yard guy than he is anything less than that. Guys, if you're looking for a really fun place to have some gambling fun, then check out FanDuel Sportsbook and take your first swing at betting on Major League Baseball and get 10 times your first bet amount and bonus bets up to $200 with FanDuel. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting on everything from money line to over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you guys for tuning in, and a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Tune into tomorrow's episode of the podcast as we wrap up the best of the rest of players we didn't discuss. That's going to be guys like Javen Jacobs. It's going to be guys like Troy Omeire. That's going to be the tight ends, Bryce Pierre and Messiah Swinson, and a little bit more. Tune in tomorrow as we talk about those guys as well and predict their stats. All right. Next up, we got receiving stats for Cameron Skattebo. And Skattebo is quite the pass catcher. During his time with Sacramento State, he caught 43 balls. He was averaging well over 10 yards a carry, and he scored 4 times. So looking at what he can do with Arizona State, I kind of like his best case scenario here. And this, again, is going to be a guy that has truly proven he's got pass catching prowess. And similar to his predecessors, we have seen good pass catchers at the running back position. Both Valladay and Rachaad White, transfer running backs, knew how to catch the football. They were both incredibly involved in the pass catching game. And I don't see any reason why Skattebo can't follow in their footsteps. That's why with my best case scenario here, I'm going to be going with, we'll go 40 catches, and I will say 450 receiving yards. So you know what? I'll stick with 400. I think that 450 would be pretty insane. We'll go 40 catches for 400 receiving yards, right on that 10 yards per catch there. That would be a really, really good season for him. That would be a very good season for any running back to be able to catch for a flat 10 yards per reception. You typically are very happy with guys that are getting in that 6 to 8 yards per catch range. This guy would be getting 10, and that would be insane. This is also a best case scenario where they're really just getting a running back involved, and Skattebo is becoming a beneficiary of them getting that running back position involved. I think here that this would be Skattebo just blowing up, because if you look at what I gave him for the rushing yards, that would be 1,600 scrimmage yards. That would be well over 5 yards per carry and 10 yards per reception. You talk about him as a Pac-12 freshman of the year at this point, or not freshman, offensive player of the year. But we'll get there. We'll talk about that momentarily. On the flip side, a worst case scenario, similar to him not getting the work in the ground game, I'm going to say that a worst case is probably about 15 catches for 100 yards. So well under that 10 yards per reception, still a healthy amount, but this would definitely be one of those situations where he is just not involved the way that we anticipate him to probably get involved with the team. Overall, I definitely feel like he's going to be more involved than not, which is why my prediction here is going to be 25 catches for 200 yards. It's a healthy number. It's a very healthy number. It's a healthy yards per reception. I do think he probably gets into the end zone 1, 2, maybe more than that for through the air. We'll talk about my prediction for touchdowns here in just a moment, but this is a guy that's going to get involved in the offense one way or the other. I just don't envision a scenario where he's not a focal point of this team. This is a running back who is very battle tested and has proven that he can be a bell cow for the team and that he can produce at a very high level. He's going to be that with Arizona State as well. And I just think that this is somebody that you have to get the ball to at the end of the day. And not getting him the football would be probably a little bit irresponsible. Getting it to him on the ground, got to do that there. But I also think you got to do it through the air for him as well. One more time, thank you guys as always for tuning in. Wherever you get your podcast, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and make sure you tune in to tomorrow's show as we go through the best of the rest skill positions that we didn't talk about and prepare to talk about the quarterbacks next week. You did hear me right, plural quarterbacks. All right, scrimmage touchdowns and then final thoughts for Cameron Skattebo. Scrimmage touchdowns, I'm going with 15 here, and I will split it up. I will say 12 on the ground, 3 through the air. If he's getting 15 touchdowns with 1,600 scrimmage yards, with 10 yards per catch, with over 5 yards per carry, you again talk about this guy as a Pac-12 offensive player of the year. The reason why I can envision this as a best case scenario, this would all be predicated on he is the de facto number one running back here, and nobody is usurping carries from him. Nobody is going to be feeding in and taking away the opportunities that he has. And then he fits into the Kenny Dillingham, Bo Baldwin offense and just explodes. That is the best case scenario for him. All the yards, all the touchdowns. Again, that's 1,200 rushing yards, 400 receiving yards, 15 touchdowns for his scrimmage. Absolutely massive season. One of the best seasons a running back could have. Worst case, I'm still going with a really solid 5 touchdowns, and I'm still going to say it's all 5 on the ground. I don't know that if he's only getting 15 catches in my worst case scenario, if he's going to find the ball through the air. That is my worst case scenario. 500 rushing yards, 100 receiving yards on 15 catches, and 5 total touchdowns. My final prediction is 10 touchdowns, and I will go 9 on the ground, 1 through the air. This would be with 900 rushing yards and 200 receiving yards on 25 catches. This is what I feel very comfortable with. Once again, I do think that this ends up being a player that probably is going to be closer to 1,000 rushing yards and 12 to 1,300 scrimmage yards, going to be around that 10 touchdown range. I do think that Cameron Skattebo is going to be a very good player this year. And let's go ahead and wrap it up talking about Skattebo. The reason why I feel so confident that he's going to be able to make the transition is because he showed it off already. During spring practice, Skattebo was so far and away the best running back on the team. And again, there wasn't too much competition because so many guys weren't able to participate. Totally understand that. But nonetheless, Skattebo did so much damage during his opportunities that he was able to put together during spring practice that it's really difficult to imagine he's not going to come into training camp with every opportunity to continue to prove that he's that guy, pal. There's also the factor that he has shown that capacity already. And he's shown it in gameplay too, like not just practice. During the spring scrimmage game that they had, Skattebo was, I think he was over 100 scrimmage yards for the people who were tracking it. He was able to get into the end zone. He showed the ability to cut. He showed the ability to catch the ball. He was a great runner. He was a really good receiver. He's shown it in action as well. This is definitely a player who has the potential, who has the capacity, who has that overall upside here to be a starting running back for the team, to be a number one running back for a team, to be a difference maker for a team. Kenny Dillingham and the Sun Devils are going to be relying on this ground game to be able to help out everything else because they're going to want to see what they can possibly get out of these quarterbacks. And these quarterbacks are going to need some assistance with their ground game. They're going to need some assistance with a proven running back, and that's Cameron Skattebo. Cameron Skattebo does everything. He runs hard, he catches the ball, he falls into the end zone, and he makes the most out of his opportunities with high volume and high yards per carry and high yards per reception. He does everything for you. That's the reason why when we take a look at those highs, the lows, and my predictions, I feel much more confident with his highs than I do with his lows. But what do you guys think of Cameron Skattebo? Do you think that he's the true number one running back here? Do you think that this is a guy who's going to need some time to adjust to Power 5 level of competition? What do you think his stats are going to be? Predict his stats and let me know what you guys think on YouTube. Leave a comment. If you're not on YouTube, tweet at me. You can hit me up at Richie Bradshaw 36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. That's all that I have for you guys today. Again, thank you guys as always for tuning in. Wherever you get those podcasts, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. And of course, stay in touch with that content by following me on Twitter. You can find me at Richie Bradshaw 36 and the podcast as well at LO_Sun Devils. Until next time, guys, when we talk about the best of the rest players for the Sun Devils, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.